Ronan left the engagement ring on my finger, yet sent me through Shimon Pass in exchange for his former lover, who had been held captive by a hostile tribe. He said it would only take a season, he would definitely ransom me back. Everyone believed that, just as I had for the past 10 years, I would understand his predicament and honor our engagement on his behalf. Only Soren, the chieftain of the foreign tribe that took me in, handed me a door lock and a dagger on our first night and told me I could refuse his chamber, his protection, even refuse to become anyone's wife. As the iron gate at Shimon Pass rose, Ronan was still holding my hand. His palm was warm, and his thumb pressed against my engagement ring, gently rubbing it just as he had done every time I'd felt anxious about the Marin family's debts in the past. "One season," he said. "Once things settle down at Silverstream Ferry, I'll come for you." Beyond the border, the black flag of the Stanahorn Confederation fluttered taut in the wind. 7 Valkyr warriors stood on the frozen mud. The man at the front was half a head taller than the rest, his long, dark gray hair tied at the nape of his neck, with 2 short horns curving backward from the sides of his forehead. Soren Thorn, chieftain of the Hemlock Hearth, guardian of the Stanahorn Confederation, and the one designated to receive me under the terms of the ceasefire agreement. I looked over Ronan's shoulder and saw the door on the other side opening. Maeve Arden was being escorted out by 2 neutral guards. She had been detained at the Stanahorn border for 4 months and was so thin she could barely hold up her cloak. When she saw Ronan, her legs gave way. Ronan immediately let go of me and took 2 steps toward her. His actions were faster than his promises. The neutral recorder cleared his throat. "The exchange has not yet been completed." Ronan stopped and looked back at me, a fleeting look of embarrassment crossing his face. I mistook that brief moment of embarrassment for guilt. "Which day, exactly?" I asked. "What? The date you're redeeming me." Representatives from both sides were watching us. The cavalry from Red Oak Castle knew we'd been engaged for 8 years, and they also knew that during the Mullen family's darkest days, I'd been the one who stood with Ronan in the old granary, counting sack after sack of moldy grain, helping him secure his first vote in the Ashen Valley Alliance. They probably thought I'd cry, throw my arms around him, and beg him to choose someone else. But my mother, Mira, still lived on the Ver family's land. Winter heating, food rations, and debt relief for the old Marin estate were all held in the trust left by Ronan's father. The night before the exchange, Ronan laid these ledgers out before me and said that if the truce broke down, the Ver family would have no choice but to revoke the protection of the dependent households first. He didn't say, "Your mother will be driven out." He simply let me read between the lines. Before the Winter Council, Ronan finally replied, 90 days at most. "Please record that," the scribe said, raising his pen. Ronan frowned. "Ella, you don't need to include our private conversation in the treaty records. You're the one who made me believe it would be just 1 season," I said, looking at him. "Since you weren't just stringing me along, you shouldn't be afraid to leave a record." Soren's gaze fell upon my face. His eyes were a very light gray, so still it was almost unsettling. Rumor had it that the Valkyries could smell fear and detect lies in a person's breath. I didn't know what he sensed in me, but I saw him step aside, clearing the path to the east shore. Ronan finally nodded to the scribe, the pen tip scraped across the parchment. I remembered the 3 witnesses present that day, and I also remembered the exchange agreement that Ronan kept tucked under his elbow the entire time, refusing to let me examine it closely. "Ella," he reached out again to tuck the collar of my cloak around me. "Don't be afraid. You're just a guarantor of peace, no one will harm you. Soren needs the granaries on the west bank, he wouldn't dare." "Then why do I have to go?" His lips twitched. Maeve coughed softly behind him. Ronan turned around, his expression immediately tensing. I already had my answer. An old boundary line was carved into the center of the stone gate. Red stone lay to the west, black stone to the east. As I stepped across it, Ronan didn't pull me back. He supported Maeve and draped his own cloak over her shoulders with his own hands. The iron gate slowly closed behind me. Before the last gap closed, I saw Maeve tilt her face up and say something to him. Ronan lowered his head to listen, his hand still resting on her shoulder. The engagement ring dug painfully into the palm of my glove. The journey to Hemlock Hall took 2 hours. Soren rode at the head of the column. He did not speak to me, nor did he carry his spoils across the front of his saddle like the Valkyries of legend. It was already dark when we arrived. Hemlock Hall was not a fortress, but rather a stone city that seemed to have grown up around a massive hearth. Around the long table, some were distributing bread, others were changing dressings for wounded guards, and children weaved between the warriors' legs, clutching wooden bowls. When they saw me, all voices fell silent for a moment. Kaya Thorne stood at the entrance to the guest quarters. She had short horns similar to Soren's, her hair braided with silver rings, and her gaze swept from my ring to my boots. "How many attendants did the human noble bring for her guarantor?" "Not a single one," I said. She snorted derisively. "How frugal." Soren pushed open the door to the innermost room. Inside were a bed, a fireplace, a table, and chairs. Outside the window stood a low stone wall. Guards were stationed beyond the wall, but there were no attendants. He placed an iron key on the table, then unsheathed the dagger at his waist and pushed it, sheath and all, next to the key. "The door is locked from the inside," he said. "I didn't touch either of those items. Can a lock stop you?" Kia raised an eyebrow. But Soren replied, "It can. This is your hearth hall. So the rules apply to me first." He stood outside the door. Without crossing the threshold, foreign sponsors are granted a 30-night period of sanctuary. During this time, no one may require you to take a hearth oath, live with anyone, or accept any physical contact you do not consent to. If a chieftain violates this, the Council of Seven Hearth can remove them from office that very day. If an ordinary member violates it, they will be expelled from the hearth hall. I looked at the dagger, and after 30 nights? You will publicly confirm your identity. Become your wife? A sponsor is not a wife. This was the first thing I'd heard since setting foot on the East Coast, and it differed from what Ronan had told me. Soren pointed to the key. Kaya is in charge of your basic arrangements. You can refuse the people she assigns to you, or you can request a female guard. You can't leave Federation territory before crossing the border. At other times, you have the right to lock the door. What if I refuse all the arrangements? Then you'll have to boil your own water, chop your own firewood, and find your own way. Kaya snorted, as if this was finally the brother she knew. I picked up the key, closed the door in front of them, and locked it. It was quiet outside the door for a moment. Soren's footsteps faded first. Kaya, however, didn't leave. She said through the door, "You can indeed refuse the attendance. But if you freeze to death tomorrow morning, don't blame us for murdering your guarantor." I pushed a chair against the door from behind. "I'll tend the fire." "Very well." She left, too. I stood in that unfamiliar room for a long time, clutching the dagger. The hilt bore no forge mark and contained no hidden mechanisms. It was simply a practical weapon, sharpened to a fine edge. Ronan never allowed me to keep weapons in my bedroom. He said Red Oak Castle was safe enough, and that I was a light sleeper who might accidentally hurt myself. That night, I tucked the dagger under my pillow and clenched the key in my palm. No one came to test my door. The next day, I went to the messenger station. Cross-border mail from Stonehorn must be registered on a wooden board with the recipient's name and wax seal. The contents are randomly inspected by neutral recorders. Kaya leaned against the counter, watching me write down Mira Marlin. "Letters sent to Red Oak Fort will eventually end up in the Ver family's review office first," she said. "Will you open them?" "Possibly. The Ver family will, too. If you request private sealing, we won't look at the contents, but we can't guarantee the West Coast won't open them." I wrote 2 letters. The first one said I had arrived safely, that my lodgings were warm, and asked my mother not to worry. The second one was only 3 lines long, hidden in a cargo manifest for a neutral salt merchant. "My mother and I have a very old agreement. If she writes back saying, 'The white roses in the courtyard are still there,' it means no one is coercing her. If she writes, 'The hemlocks are growing well this year,' it means someone has read the letter. If she doesn't mention a single word, it means she never received it at all." Kaya watched as I applied different seals to the 2 letters. "Clever," she said. "But it might also make Ronan realize sooner that you don't trust him. Just because I'm waiting for him to take me back doesn't mean I have to turn a blind eye." "Do you really believe he'll come?" I paused as I adjusted my cuffs. "He promised." Kia didn't laugh at me. She placed the first letter in the registry bag and tucked the second into the salt merchant's wooden crate. "I can only guarantee it gets off the East Coast," she said. "After that, it's up to your mother's luck." On the 3rd night, the Hemlock Hearth Hall held a public banquet to celebrate the ceasefire. Brenhell sat on the left side of the long table, representing the northern hearth. He was nearly 60 years old, with half his right horn broken off, yet his voice was louder than that of any young warrior. "The human guarantor should drink the first cup of hearth wine offered by the chieftain," he said. "This signifies her acceptance of the hearth hall's protection." A server placed the copper cup within Soren's reach. In the tales passed down in Ember Valley, when a chieftain of another clan offers wine, it is a proposal of marriage. Once a woman drinks it, she is bound by the hearthmark and becomes his mate, unable even to flee. I did not reach for it. The conversation around the long table gradually fell silent. Bren looked at me. "Don't the women of the Ver family dare to drink even a single cup of wine?" "I'm from the Marin family," I said, "and I won't drink it until someone explains what status this cup will grant me." A vein throbbed near Bren's broken horn. Soren set his cup back on the table. "Then I won't drink it either. Gatekeeper, she has publicly refused your protection. Refusing the ritual does not mean refusing peace. Humans will see this as weakness. That's the human's problem." He motioned for the scribe to step forward. Before the scribe could speak, I said, "Please record that I am refusing any act that could be interpreted as a betrothal or a commitment to a partner. I accept the public protection offered by the Hemlock Hearth in accordance with the ceasefire agreement." The scribe looked at Soren. Soren nodded. "Write it down exactly as she said." Bren tapped the tabletop with his knuckles. "A hearth oath requires both parties to speak. Unless she says she agrees, the mead is just mead. What has Ember Valley made of us? It's made of us as people who, once we've claimed a woman, can decide her entire life for her, I said. Someone at the table let out a murmur of discontent. Soren did not defend Stonehorn. He simply moved the cup of hearthmead toward himself and drank it in one gulp. Now it's just my drink, he said. Shall we continue with dinner? The conversation slowly resumed. But for the first time, I couldn't immediately look away. When I returned to my room that night, Ronan's letter was already on the table. He had written 2 pages about the latest news from Red Oak Castle, the granary accounts, the council disputes, and Maeve's health. He went into detail about everything except when he would come to pick me up. In the final paragraph, he asked me to keep an eye on the shipment volumes from the East Coast salt mines and the guard rotations at the Hemlock Hall. This isn't spying, he wrote. It's just so we can find out sooner whether Sauron is truly committed to maintaining peace. You've always known best how to help me. Maeve had included a short note. Thank you for saving me. I know Ronan trusts you most, which is why he entrusted you with such an important responsibility. Once I'm feeling better, I'll take care of Red Oak Castle for him, and I hope you return safely. I read both letters 3 times. When Ronan was 18 and hadn't yet secured the support of the heir, he'd also said that I knew best how to help him. At that time, his father had died suddenly, and the Ver family's granaries were managed by his 3 uncles. None of them were willing to hand over the accounts to a young heir. I stood by him for 2 months, tracking down every instance of embezzled grain and ferry revenue. Later, when someone asked him why he trusted me, he smiled and said, Ella won't leave me. She cares more about the future of the Ver family than I do. At the time, I thought that was love. I took out a sheet of letter paper and wrote back just 6 lines. I will not provide Stone's Corner's troops, grain reserves, or guard routes. I demanded that he initiate the redemption by the deadline specified in the records. I demanded that my mother's residence and right to protection remain unaffected by my decision. After finishing, I did not destroy his original letter. Instead, I locked it away in the wooden box under my desk, along with Maeve's short note. The next day, I went to the archives in the foyer of my own accord. The Stone Corner version of the ceasefire agreement totaled 47 pages. At first, the archivist would only let me see the public transcript, but I persuaded him by citing the clause from the old Silverstream Crossing agreement stating that the guarantor must be fully aware of all consequences of their status. Kaya stood by the bookshelf, arms crossed, watching as I flipped to the exchange provisions. The guarantor is not a prospective spouse. The guarantor may retain their protected status for 30 nights thereafter. Any partnership must be confirmed through a dual-voice hearth oath. The most important line reads, adult sponsors must sign their consent in person. During a state of war or emergency, a proxy certificate may be submitted, but the original intent may still be reviewed within 90 days. I never signed it, I said. The recorder's hand paused on the ledger page. The Ver family submitted a proxy consent certificate, Kaya said. Who certified it on my behalf? The original is at the Stonegate Oath Court. We only record the reference number here. I stared at the reference number and slowly copied it onto the inside of my cuff. Has Soren seen that certificate? Kia didn't answer for him. You should ask him yourself. I closed the agreement and realized for the first time, with crystal clarity, that Ronan hadn't just failed to ask me if I was willing. He might even have answered for me. The clash at Silverstream Ferry occurred in the early morning of the 5th day. A caravan bearing the firefeather mark of the Ver family refused to submit to inspection by the Stonehorn guards. The leader said they were acting on Ronan's orders, transporting the first shipment of winter provisions following the ceasefire. I was accompanying Kaya to check on the registration station when guards on both banks drew their weapons. Let them pass, the human leader said, raising his voice the moment he saw me. Miss Marin can attest that the Ver family's firefeather mark is never forged. All eyes turned to me. The markings on the wagon were indeed those of the Ver family, but they lacked the silver border that signified official authorization. That was the private merchant seal my uncle Ronan usually used, valid only within the West Bank territories. You have no authority to represent the crossing, I said. The leader's smile faded. You've been away from Red Oak Castle for just a few days, and you're already speaking for the enemy. I'm stopping you from impersonating an official envoy. Open the wagon. This is the Ver family's cargo. Soren approached from the other side of the checkpoint. He didn't draw his sword, he merely placed his hand on the wagon's chain. Under the sharing agreement, unregistered cargo is to be detained for 3 days, he said. Resisting inspection results in the leader's arrest. The human guards immediately gripped their sword hilts. I recognized 2 of them. They had once collected debts for Ronan's uncle and Marin, and they knew better than anyone where my mother lived. If you make a move here, I said to the leader, the Firefeather private seal will be sent back to the Ash Valley Council along with a record of this breach. If Ronan admits he authorized this, he'll bear responsibility for circumventing the ceasefire inspections. If he denies it, you'll remain on the East Coast as smugglers. Are you threatening your own people? I'm telling you the consequences. The squad leader stared at me for a long time, then finally released his grip on the sword hilt. The truck was opened, the lower compartment contained grain, but the upper compartment concealed unregistered steel arrowheads. Muffled curses rang out among the Stanahorn guards. Bran demanded the squad leader's execution on the spot. I stepped in front of the open cargo compartment. The Wintergate sharing agreement only permits the seizure of goods, detention, and return for review. If we kill them now, the West Bank will claim that Stanahorn has torn up the ceasefire. They cross the border with weapons. Then seize the weapons and hand the men over to the Court of Oaths. Don't carry out their provocation for them. Before Bran could speak again, Soren had already ordered his men to seal the truck. Proceed according to the agreement, he said, looking at me. Are you certain that's not Ronan's official seal? I'm certain. The official seal has a ring of silver powder in the lower right corner that doesn't dissolve when exposed to water. Soren had someone bring water. The red on the private seal quickly began to bleed. The way the crowd looked at me changed. It wasn't all trust. At least they no longer saw me merely as a bargaining chip dressed in human clothes. On the return journey, freezing rain fell on the mountain. A sudden avalanche of loose rocks rolled down from above the narrow path, forcing the procession to press against the cliff face. The horse beneath me shied and reared. I lost my footing in one stirrup, and my old injury was violently jolted. Soren first reined in my horse, then swung himself to the ground. He reached out his hand, but paused a few inches from my elbow. May I touch you? The pain left me speechless. I could only stare at his hand. A nod counts, he said. I nodded once. His hand cradled my arm, steady and restrained, neither wrapping around my waist nor pulling me down from the horse. As soon as I regained my footing, he immediately let go and took half a step back. Did you smell it? I asked. What? My fear. Do you know what I'm afraid of? No. Freezing rain fell on his short horns, gathering into a drop of water. The scent only tells me you're afraid or maybe in pain. It doesn't speak for you. Ash Valley said you can smell lies. People get scared when they're nervous, too, and when they're telling the truth. He glanced at my ankle. Can you walk? I took a step. The pain had already subsided. I can. He returned to his own horse, not taking the opportunity to lift me onto his. For the rest of the mountain path, I could always feel his gaze occasionally resting on my back. Whenever I turned around, he was already looking ahead. On the day of the Hearth Hall selection, I witnessed an unfinished hearth oath in the central courtyard. 2 Valkyries stood on either side of the brazier, each holding a cup. The first spoke her consent, the second remained silent for a long time before setting her cup down. There was no mockery in the courtyard, nor any attempts at persuasion. The presiding officer simply asked, "Do you wish to pause or terminate?" "Terminate," the person said. The brazier was immediately covered, the 2 stepped back, and the recorder crossed out the ceremony number. Bren stood beside me. We've wasted the entire Hearth Hall's time. Will he lose his residence tonight? I asked. Why would he? Because he rejected his partner. Bren looked as if he'd heard an absurd question. He rejected his partner, not his membership. Soren looked at me from the other side of the courtyard. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about taking vows with him. What I was thinking about was where I could live if I rejected Ronan. That evening, I cornered Soren in the gatekeeper's council chamber. You've seen my proxy consent form. I placed the copied number on his desk. Why did you accept it? He dismissed the 2 guards who were in the middle of a meeting, but left the door open. At the Emergency War Council, Ronan submitted the Ver family seal, the names of 2 witnesses, and a copy of your old authorization. What old authorization? You once authorized him to represent the Marin family in the Silver Stream ferry negotiations. That authorization only concerned the ferry shares. I know that now. Now. Soren did not avert his gaze from me. At the time, the salt wagons on the east bank were seized, the granaries on the west bank were closed, and 12 people died at the border within 3 days. Ronan proposed exchanging Maeve for a high-ranking guarantor. I reviewed the documents and chose to trust his power of attorney. You didn't ask me. No. Was it because there wasn't enough time, or because the person sent wasn't someone you knew? His jaw tensed slightly. Both. I had thought he would say he'd been deceived too, that the ceasefire had saved more lives, that he'd make me understand. He didn't. I accepted a consent form that should have been confirmed by the person themselves, he said. That was my mistake. An apology won't make me leave. I know. I want a formal review. Retrieve the original document, verify the witnesses, and have all conclusions entered into the record of the Court of Oaths. All right. Even if the agreement is invalid. Even if the agreement is invalid. He took a seal-stamped request for case files out of the drawer. The date was the day after I arrived at the Hemlock Fire Hall. You already had your suspicions. I sensed your fear at Stonegate Pass, but you didn't struggle, nor did you cry for help. Fear doesn't prove you didn't consent, and silence doesn't prove you did. Why didn't you tell me? Because I had no answers. You'd just been led across the border by one man's promises. You didn't need another man trading your trust for unproven hope. I placed the request for records back on the table. The crack in my heart hadn't closed. But on the other side of that crack, for the first time, a sense of responsibility, not an excuse, emerged. On the day of the 30th night hearing, the public chamber of the Hemlock Hearth was packed. Bren, representing the Seven Hearth Council, read aloud my three options: return to the West Coast border within the redemption period to await Ronan, take a hearth oath with a willing Stanahorn member, or remain on the East Coast as a protected ward, awaiting review of the agreement. The messenger sent by Ronan stood on the west side, holding an official letter from Red Oak Castle. The heir of the Vales believes, the messenger said, that if Miss Marin refuses to return and wait, she is actively reneging on her original betrothal obligations. My betrothal contract does not state that I must serve as his war guarantor, I said. You promised to share the future with the Vales family. To share it, that means we would each bear our own share after discussing it together. It is not for him to decide, and for me to bear it. A murmur of discussion rose in the hall. Bren tapped the stone table. What do you choose? I saw Soren standing at the far end of the long table. He wasn't wearing the gatekeeper's cloak, nor had he come to stand beside me. I suddenly realized he was deliberately making himself look unlike a suitor awaiting an answer. The third option, I said. Until the review is complete, I retain my status as a protected guarantor. I will not return to Ronan, nor will I take vows with anyone. The messenger's expression darkened. This will be recorded as your refusal to return to your fiancé. Please also record that I am refusing only a summons that has not been confirmed by me. Soren pressed his hearthmark at the end of the record, signifying that the Hemlock Hearth accepted my choice. This was the first time I had publicly won anything since arriving on the East Coast. Not the way home. Just a period of time when I didn't have to belong to anyone. That little bit of time soon came at a price. That night, the Seven Fires Council remained in session at the Hemlock Fire Hall. According to Stone's Corner custom, meetings concerning food supplies must keep the hearth burning, so as I passed the long table, I could hear Bren reporting the grain reserves item by item. The North Fire Hall's supplies would last only 47 days. The salt wagons from East Ridge Fire Hall were stuck at Silver Stream Ferry, and two families who had just lost their fathers were waiting for flour from the West Shore. My third option would temporarily suspend the exchange agreement, giving Ember Valley the right to delay the next shipment of grain wagons. She is not one of us, yet she makes our children bear the cost of her hesitation, said an elder. I stopped at the entrance to the hearth hall. Soren sat in the center of the 7 seats, with no wine before him, only a growing stack of ledger pages. She is exercising the rights granted by the agreement, he said. The agreement also allows us to confirm the long-term guarantee after the 30th night. If she doesn't return to the West Bank and doesn't swear an oath to you, on what grounds should the Ver family continue to deliver grain? Because both sides need the crossing. That's next year's concern. The hearth hall needs to get through this winter. I walked in and placed the wooden token for visitors, which had been by the door, on the table. Without the token, outsiders were not allowed to speak during deliberations. May I see the grain wagon records? Bren gave me a cold look. You've already chosen today not to be one of us. My choice not to be anyone's subordinate doesn't mean I want you to go hungry. I've always kept the accounts for the west bank of Silverstream Ferry, and I know which shipments of grain have already had their advance payments made to the salt mines. Someone pushed the records toward me, while others clearly looked displeased. The ledger pages showed that the advance payment for 3 cartloads of wheat flour had been made prior to the exchange. If the Ver family withheld them, it would not be a suspension of future trade, but rather the misappropriation of goods that had already been settled. I pointed to the corresponding entry. First, demand delivery of these 3 cartloads. Ronan can dispute the validity of the guarantee, but he cannot use old accounts as bargaining chips. Bren quickly checked the stamp numbers. His expression softened slightly, but he still asked, and then what? I don't know. You don't know, yet you dared to push both clans into this situation? Soren was about to speak, but I raised my hand to stop him. Yes, I said, because I cannot refuse an identity that hasn't been agreed upon until I'm certain that no one will be affected. But I will participate in finding the next form of guarantee, as long as it secures the goods and profits, not a specific person. Bren stared at me for a long time, then ordered the recorder to immediately send a letter to Silverstream Ferry. The next day, 3 cartloads of wheat flour were granted permission to cross the border. This didn't endear me to the council, but it made me realize for the first time that freedom isn't just about saying no and walking away. Others couldn't burden me with the weight of an entire winter, nor could I pretend that my choices had no real-world repercussions. Later, when I proposed the ferry deposit, the very first set of figures I cited was copied directly from the ledger page from that night. After the hearing, Kaya took me to her residence. She spread out an even older copy of the federal charter on the table and pointed to a passage. There is a 4th path, the free hearth. Why hasn't anyone mentioned it today? Because it's not a guarantor status option, it's an individual application made after renouncing one's original affiliation. The Seven Hearth would never actively encourage someone with a right to land inheritance to do this. Can it dissolve the engagement? It can dissolve the bond of allegiance and the protection of the old family. Whether the betrothal is nullified must still be confirmed by the vow court. But once the application is approved, you will no longer be an heir of the Mullen vassal family within the Ember Valley system. I read on slowly. The applicant must renounce her original family's land, vassal dividends, and right of return, and cannot automatically join any hearth as a partner. She must prove she has a minimum livelihood guarantee, or that a hearth is willing to accept her as a free member. What about the old Marin estate? It belongs to the creditors. If your mother still relies on the Ver family's protection, she'll lose her right to live there, too. I pinched the edge of the page with my fingernail. What if she leaves first? Kia looked at me. Do you want to send her to neutral territory? I want her to choose for herself. Ronan will stop her. So I need a route that doesn't pass through the Ver family's way station. Kia was silent for a moment, then pushed the charter toward me. I can find someone, but I can't guarantee success. That's enough. She got up to fetch a map, but turned back halfway. Ella, Soren didn't tell me to tell you about this route. My heart sank. He doesn't want me to apply. He's had all the relevant bylaws brought here, Kia said, but he thinks that if he explains the free hearth to you, it'll be like steering you away from the West Bank and toward staying in his hearth hall. She placed the map in front of me. That man can be so cautious it's infuriating at times. I didn't respond. Outside the window, the fire hall was changing over to the night shift. Someone called out the number of salt wagons in a loud voice that echoed through the stone corridor. I looked down at the map and located Red Oak Fort, Stone Gate Pass, and the abandoned furnace courtyard. There isn't a single road between these 3 points that doesn't pass through someone's domain. I'll just have to blaze my own trail. Ronan's second letter arrived sooner than we'd anticipated. The envelope bore the official seal of the Ver heirs, and the contents remained dignified. The winter protection status for the old Marin estate will be reviewed at the end of the month. Your mother is in poor health and should not be moved. I do not wish for her to suffer because of your momentary misunderstanding, so I hope you will reconsider your position. In the next paragraph, he reminded me that the Hemlock Hearth's grain reserves this year could not withstand any disputes. If I continued to refuse to cooperate, the Stanahorn Confederation might lose its guarantee of a ceasefire, and then it would not be just Mira who would suffer. At the end, he still wrote, I know you, Ella. You won't let innocent people bear the consequences for you. That line always used to soften my heart. When Ronan was under attack from his uncle, I took the blame for the audit. When he was too nervous to sleep the night before his first Ash Valley Council meeting, I waited outside his door until dawn. When he blamed himself for Maeve's disappearance, I told him time and again that it wasn't his fault. He knows I value responsibility more than my own grievances. So whenever he needed me to back down, he placed the safety of more people in my hands. When Soren arrived, I didn't hide the letter. I pushed the parchment toward the edge of the table. Please include this letter in the audit materials. After he finished reading it, his gray eyes lingered on the words re-audit. This is a threat. He'll say it's just standard debt collection procedure. What do you think? I slowly turned the engagement ring to face me. I think he's telling me that as long as I keep disobeying him, Mother will lose the roof over her head. This was the first time I'd ever told anyone else that Ronan was controlling me. Saying it didn't bring any relief. I just felt as if a block of ice were pressing down on my stomach. Let's move up the plan to get Mira out, I said. I'm going to the unclaimed hearth. Ask Gaiman to retrieve the original documents, and apply for a neutral pass for her as well. Someone might try to stop you along the way. So you're going to lock me in the hearth hall? Soren took half a step back. That was a gesture he made when he was nervous. I didn't notice it until then. I'll reinforce the escort, he said. The decision is still yours. The party left the Iron Fir Hearth Hall 2 days later. The unclaimed Hearth Hall is located in a valley north of the East Shore, accessible via an old, abandoned stone arch road. Kaya, accompanied by 6 guards, was personally escorted by Soren to deliver the seals of the archives. I sewed Ronan's 2 letters into the lining of my cloak, while the originals were locked in the hall of the Hearth's filing cabinet. The ambush took place at the narrowest point of the old Stone Gate Road. The first arrow missed its target but severed the straps holding the document case to the packhorse's back. The wooden chest rolled down the slope, and 3 masked men burst from behind the trees, rushing straight for it. Protect the seal, Kaya shouted, drawing her sword. The second arrow grazed her shoulder, her foot slipped, and her knee struck the stone wall. Soren led his men to block the attackers from the front. I spotted a gap in the trees to my left. Beyond it lay the old road leading to Ashen Valley. A masked figure spotted it too, deliberately stepping aside half a step and shouting in a human accent, Miss Marin, run west. As long as I made it over that slope, I might return to familiar territory. Or I might simply vanish in a place with no pass and no witnesses. Ronan would claim the Stanahorn Confederation failed to protect me, and the investigation would be halted. Kaya was trying to get up from the ground. Another man lunged for the mark on her waist. I grabbed the document tube that had rolled to my feet and took 2 steps toward the old trail. Sure enough, my pursuers left Kaya. Instead of continuing west, I stepped onto a low stone wall at the bend, jumped back onto the mountain trail from the other side, and threw the document tube forcefully to Kaya. Catch it. She caught it with one hand. Just as the pursuer turned, Soren charged in from the side. The two of them tumbled into the mud together. Soren took a slash to his shoulder but still twisted his opponent's wrist and pinned him to the ground. The remaining attackers quickly retreated into the woods. The man we'd captured chewed through the bitter herb hidden behind his teeth and passed out. Kaya fished a red copper seal out of his bootleg. It had no silver border in the lower right corner and quickly blurred when wet. Just like the seals carried by the smugglers at Silverstream Ferry. You could have run just now, Soren said, sitting by the roadside while a guard staunched the bleeding from his shoulder. That path looked too much like someone had left it there just for me. Or maybe it really does lead to Ash Valley. The Valley of Ashes doesn't mean safety. He looked up at me. Rainwater trickled down the side of his neck and into his collar. The wound wasn't deep, but the blood had stained a large patch of the fabric. I crouched down and helped the healer hold one end of the bandage in place. Is that okay? I asked. Soren didn't seem to expect me to use his own words. After a moment, he said, yes. Through the bandage, my fingertips felt the warmth of his shoulder. Valka's sense of smell told him I was still afraid, though he didn't know how much of that fear was due to his injury this time. He didn't ask. I didn't say anything either. The hall of the unclaimed hearth is smaller than Shimon Pass, and there are no clan banners in the circular hall. Ayman Greer instructed us to seal away the record retrieval seal, the assailant's private seal, and the document tube separately. He refused to cancel the exchange outright because of the attack. The fact that someone obstructed the review only proves that someone did not want the review to continue, he said. It does not prove that the proxy's consent is invalid. I suppressed my anger. So what did you find out? Ayman unfolded the original witness register from Stone Gate. The proxy certificate listed 2 witnesses from Red Oak Castle, a granary steward and a knight of House Fur. However, on the day of signing, the granary steward was in a northern town receiving a shipment, and the knight's travel records showed he didn't enter Red Oak Castle until 3 days later. The names are correct, but the timing is off. This raises serious doubts, said Iman. But I must verify who submitted the emergency register, and I must grant the Vale family a period for rebuttal. So I'm still the guarantor. Yes. Isn't it enough that I say I never agreed to this? If personal statements could override evidence, any treaty could be denied by one party after the fact. His voice was even. The process may disappoint you today, but it may protect you tomorrow. I knew he was right, yet I still wanted to tear that roster to shreds. Soren sat to my right, his shoulder freshly bandaged. He didn't say a word on my behalf. I handed a copy of Ronan's first letter to Ayman. After the exchange, he asked me to spy on Stonehorn's grain reserves and guards. This doesn't prove the signature was forged, but it does prove he believed it was useful for him for me to remain here. Ayman took it and asked, "Are there any other letters?" I remembered the earlier letters in the wooden box. During the 2 most difficult years of Ronan's tenure, he often wrote to me things he couldn't say to the council. He wrote about the Marin family's value in the truce negotiations, and he wrote, "As long as you remain by my side, I will not lose this stake." At the time, it seemed like dependence, but looking back now, every sentence carries another meaning. Yes, I said, but for now, I'm only submitting this one. Ayman glanced at me but didn't press the matter. He approved the final hearing, scheduled to take place before the end of the 90-day redemption period. By the time we returned to the Hemlock Hall, the human delegation had already arrived. Maeve stood by the window in the reception hall, wearing the new cloak prepared for her at Red Oak Castle. She had recovered considerably since Stone Gate, though she still instinctively turned her head at the sound of footsteps, as if to confirm that the door behind her wasn't locked. I used to resent her. Every time I recalled Ronan letting go of my hand to help her up, I couldn't help but wonder if we could still be the same as before if she hadn't come back. But as I approached, the first thing I saw were the marks of restraint on her wrist that hadn't yet faded. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said. Soren left the door to the reception hall open and stepped back onto the veranda. Maeve glanced at him and lowered her voice. "Ronan said the Valkyrie chieftain doesn't allow women to meet with visitors alone. He also said that the guarantor for the exchange would become the chieftain's consort." Her expression shifted slightly. We sat down across from each other at the long table. Maeve said she had come to discuss the winter supply route and also to thank me in person. Ronan had told her that it was my decision to agree to the exchange that had given her the chance to leave the border detention camp. "He's always felt guilty," she said. "He said this was only a temporary arrangement, and once the situation stabilizes, he'll definitely bring you back." "When?" She paused, taken aback. "Did he tell you exactly when he'd come to redeem me?" "Before winter. At Shimon Pass, he said 90 days. The first letter didn't mention a date, and in the second one, he started using mother's address to pressure me into cooperating. How do you think he plans to bring me back? Maeve gripped the rim of her cup tightly. That's between you two. You came to see me to confirm whether I'd go back, didn't you? Her breath caught for a moment. Ronan has already proposed to me, she said. We made a promise when we were children. He rescued me, there's no way he'd give me up now. Then why did he keep the engagement contract with me? Because the hearing isn't over yet. He can unilaterally request to annul the engagement. As long as he admits to bringing me here without my consent and undergoes a credibility review, he can annul it. Maeve fell silent. I found the answer in her silence. Ronan had never told her what annulling the engagement would cost him. She looked up. Do you hate me? I used to. What about now? I think you were worth saving back then. She flinched as if stung. In that case. But it's not up to Ronan to decide who pays the price. She looked at me, the hint of wariness in her eyes slowly turning to unease. He told me you know him better than anyone and wouldn't really leave, she whispered. He said that even if he brought you back, you'd understand our relationship. He also told me that once you were safe, he'd take care of everything. Take care of what? He didn't say. For the first time, we didn't see each other as obstacles in the other's love life. We were simply sitting at the same table, noticing the 2 empty seats Ronan had deliberately left. Before Maeve left, she asked me, if he comes to redeem you, will you go back? I should have said no. But Mother hadn't left Red Oak yet, and the free hearth hadn't given its approval. The answer caught in my throat, and all I could say was, first, I have to make sure he can't answer for me. The very night Maeve left, Ronan formally submitted the application for redemption from the 2 shores. When the message was delivered to my door, Soren was standing at the other end of the corridor. I read through the application, my fingers trembling so much I could barely hold the paper. Ronan was willing to return the equivalent of the salt mine's profits earned during Maeve's period of guarantee, reinstate the original betrothal contract, and accept Ella's temporary wavering after she was influenced in enemy territory. He portrayed my refusal as being under Soren's spell. He portrayed the redemption as forgiveness. Swear the hearth oath to me, I said to Soren. The guards in the corridor all stepped back. He did not approach. You're afraid. Of course I'm afraid. My mother is still in his domain, and the hearing might not rule in my favor. If the old betrothal is deemed to take precedence, the 7 hearth will send me back. I will escort you to the unclaimed hearth, or to any place willing to accept you. All that takes time. A hearth oath can immediately nullify his claim to the betrothal. Not necessarily. Ronan will contest the priority of the 2 relationships. At the very least, the 7 forges won't hand over the chief's partner. That's precisely why I can't agree. My fingertips grew suddenly cold. You don't want to choose me. Ella, you said the rules apply first to those in power. Now that I'm asking of my own accord, you're using the rules to refuse me. You're asking for protection, not a partner. What's the difference? It matters to me. He paused, his voice growing even lower. I want you to decide whether you're willing to form a relationship with me only after you're free to leave, your mother is safe, and no hearing is looming. I won't use a forge oath to transfer you from Ronan's betrothal to mine. What if I can't wait that long? Soren's jaw tightened, but he remained standing outside the doorway. Then I'll take responsibility for failing to protect you, he said, but I won't trade your fear for your consent. That statement was so true it felt like a blunt knife. I reached out to him when I was most afraid, and he didn't take my hand. I understand. I closed the door, and for the first time, I didn't wait for his footsteps to fade away. That night, the dagger still lay pressed beneath my pillow, and the key was still mine. Yet I felt more acutely than when I first arrived at the hemlock hearth that I had nowhere to go. The next day, I asked Kaya to take me to the communications room. I want to apply for free hearth status. She didn't say congratulations, she simply asked, have you thought through the cost? I'm giving up the old Marin estate, the fairy's dividend share, my claim to the Ember Valley inheritance, and my right of return. What about Mira? I'm requesting that the application take effect only after she arrives in neutral territory. I need a statement from her personally so Ronan can't claim I forced her to leave. Kaya pushed the form toward me. You spoke with Soren last night. This has nothing to do with him. You applied after he rejected you. So you think I'm acting out of spite? She clutched the pen, her gaze sharp. I think that when someone breaks free from an old attachment, it's easy to latch on to the next one. Just because Soren refused to give you the easiest option doesn't mean you should rashly cut off all your escape routes just to prove yourself. I looked at her. I'm not doing this to prove anything to him. Then what is it for? Because last night I finally realized that if my security must come from whether or not a man is willing to marry me, I'll never truly be secure. Kia stared at me for a moment, then handed me the pen. I signed my name on the preliminary declaration. Ella Marin. If the final hearing confirms this, I'll keep this name, but I'll no longer own the land it once represented. 3 days later, my mother's reply arrived via a neutral salt merchant. The edges of the stationery were dusted with soot, and the sealing wax was not her usual color. She wrote, "The white roses in the yard have been dug up. The hemlocks are growing well this year." Two coded messages appeared simultaneously. The letter had been read, but she was already preparing to leave. At the very end, there was another line in tiny handwriting, "Don't move into a room that someone else has locked for you just to save an old house for me." I stared at that sentence for a long time, my tears falling on the words old house. My mother never asked me to make sacrifices. What truly held me back was always my belief that she couldn't bear to lose me. That night, Kaya led her people away from the Hemlock Hall. Soren entrusted her with the 2 shifts of guards patrolling the eastern route, but he didn't come to see me. I didn't ask either. 4 days later, news arrived from the border station. Mira had reached the neutral territories, having been intercepted along the way by guards from the Ver family. She refused to return to the old Marin estate and, in the struggle, was thrown from her carriage, injuring her left arm. When I arrived at the station, her arm was slung across her chest, and she had a scrape on her temple. "It's my fault you got hurt," I said, kneeling by her bedside. My mother stroked my hair with her uninjured hand. "I chose to leave. You could have stayed there." "Stayed until when?" "Until Ronan needed you to obey him again." She had the neutral recorder bring her statement and signed it in front of Kia and me, renouncing the protection of the Ver family's affiliated household. "Nothing in the old manor is more important to me than you," she said. "The books your father left behind, the trees in the courtyard, I've taken everything I could. What I couldn't take, I left behind." That evening, Red Oak Castle issued a notice stating that, due to the Marin family's voluntary withdrawal from protection, the old manor had been reclaimed by the Ver Trust, and the debt moratorium had been terminated. After reading the notice, I did not request that my application for freedom be withdrawn. Mother pulled a yellowed protection contract from the bottom of her carry-on suitcase. It was a copy of the agreement the Ver family had granted us after father's death, allowing us to continue living in the old house. Every time the contract was renewed, Ronan would personally deliver new wax seals, and I always took that as a sign that he was looking out for us. "Burn it," Mother said. "There's an official record at the Court of Oaths. Burning this copy won't annul anything." "I know." She held the paper up to the fireplace, her injured arm still too weak to steady it. I supported her hand, and together we let the edge of the contract touch the flames. The flames quickly licked at the Ver family's red seal. As the paper curled up, Mother whispered, "I used to be afraid to leave that house. I thought we'd have nowhere to live in the winter." Later, I realized that what truly frightened me wasn't the cold, but having to wait for others to decide whether they'd take us in again next year. The contract was reduced to ashes, yet we still had debts, had lost our old home, and still had to figure out where our next meal would come from. But there was no one left who could use that piece of paper to answer for me. My mother held my hand, without saying it was for my sake, nor did I say that my choice was for hers. We both stepped through that door for ourselves, and then stood together again outside it. Mother stayed near the unclaimed hearth to recover, while I returned alone to the Hemlock Hearth Hall to sort through the old letters in the wooden box. The earliest one was written 9 years ago. Ronan said that only in my presence did he not have to act as the heir to the Ver family. Another read, "If the council forces me to choose between our betrothal and the crossing, I know you'll understand, we can always get married later." There was also one written 2 months before the ceasefire negotiations. "Maeve's detention has complicated matters. The Marins have no blood feud on the East Coast, and you, as a guarantor, would be most readily accepted by both sides. Fortunately, you've always been stronger than others." At the time, I only noticed the fortunately. Only now do I see that, even before the formal exchange, Ronan had already weighed me up. He wasn't acting out of momentary desperation. He simply believed, from the very beginning, that I was better suited than Maeve to bear the cost. I arranged all the letters in chronological order and compiled a breakdown of Silverstream Ferry's profits over the past 3 years, along with a rotation schedule for salt and grain supplies. If the personal guarantee failed, a ceasefire would still require assets that could be seized, that could be used for compensation, and that neither side would be willing to lose easily. I knew what mattered most to the Ver family. It wasn't me. It was the Ferry shares. The final hearing was held at Stonegate Pass. When Ronan arrived at the head of the official delegation, he was wearing the deep red ceremonial robe I knew so well, with the silver leaf insignia of the Ver heir pinned to his chest. Behind him were 12 cavalrymen, 3 representatives from Ember Valley, and Maeve. When he saw me, his expression softened at first, like a man who had finally found his long-lost fiancée. "Ella." He walked toward me. The Stanahorn guards crossed their spears. Soren stood at the front of the line but did not touch his weapon. Ronan stopped, his tone still gentle. "I've come to take you home." "Please call it a redemption hearing," I said. I did not agree to a private meeting. The smile on his face froze for a moment. "We don't have to turn 8 years of our relationship into official business. It became official business the moment you included me in the ceasefire agreement." Recorders were present all around us. Ronan became more polite, a habit of his when he was nervous. "I admit that time was tight back then, and I didn't explain every detail to you. But Maeve was very ill, and people were dying at the border. If you'd seen her back then, you'd understand my choice. Maeve lowered her eyes behind him. I understand she needed to be saved, I said. Ronan seemed to grasp something, I knew it. Ella, you've always been kinder than anyone else, and you understand the bigger picture best. Now that I've fulfilled my promise and returned with the equivalent ransom, Stanahorn has no reason to hold you any longer. Whether or not I return requires my public consent. Of course, he said, his voice softening. I won't force you. He held out his hand, palm up. You've simply been led astray by too many false influences. Once we return to Red Oak Castle, we'll renew our engagement. Your mother's living arrangements can also be rearranged. I'll persuade the council to forget what's happened during this time. You've already reclaimed the old Marin estate. The process can be reversed. On the condition that I go back with you. On the condition that you return to the place that rightfully belongs to you. I looked at his hand and didn't move. Maeve suddenly spoke up, what about me? Ronan turned back. Her face showed none of the probing expression she'd had in the Hemlock Hall, only weariness remained. You said you'd make our marriage public once the hearing was over. Now that you're renewing your engagement to her, what am I? Maeve, this isn't the time to talk about this. You're always telling her it's not the right time and you're doing the same to me. Ronan lowered his voice, I didn't rescue you just to have you undermine me here. As if struck by those words, she slowly backed away. The bells of the Stone Gate Oath Court rang out. Amon announced the start of the hearing. Representatives from Ashen Valley and the Seven Forges Council sat on either side of the circular courtyard. Bren sat to Soren's right, with this year's Federal Grain Reserve figures laid out before him. Soren did not take the seat of honor but sat at the recording desk in his capacity as the receiving party. Ronan submitted the old engagement contract first. He also brought a letter I had written many years ago. In it, I stated my willingness to share the future of the Ver family with him, to become the Lady of Red Oak Castle, and to remain by his side no matter how difficult his path to inheritance might be. These are all in Ella's own handwriting, he said. She made a long-term, explicit, and voluntary commitment to the Ver family through marriage. The exchange took place during a state of war and was intended to serve the mutual future interests of both parties. Her current refusal to return is due to the ongoing impact she has experienced in the Stanahorn estate. A representative from Ember Valley asked, Miss Marin, do you deny these letters? I do not deny them. Someone in the courtroom shifted. Ronan looked at me, a hint of almost tender certainty in his eyes. I once loved Ronan, I said. I was willing to marry him, and I truly believed our future lay at Red Oak Castle. He exhaled in relief. Ella. But agreeing to the marriage doesn't mean I agree to him trading me off to another faction, and past love doesn't grant him permanent authority to make every decision for me in the future. Ronan's hand pressed against the edge of the table. You can't separate our relationship into two unrelated matters. Becoming a wife of the Ver family inherently means taking on responsibility in times of crisis. What is your responsibility? I rescued the Ember Valley members who were being held illegally and preserved the ceasefire. You chose to save Maeve, you chose to sign the agreement, and you chose who would pay the price. Then you counted obedience as my responsibility. Because you're the best person for the job. For the first time, his voice broke through his composure, echoing through the round court. After a moment of silence, he quickly regained his composure. Because Stanahorn has no blood feud with your family, you're familiar with the Ferry Agreement, and you're level-headed enough. I know you can protect yourself. You know I won't defy you lightly. I know you trust me. You're mistaking trust for consent. Amon tapped his gavel to stop our argument. The Seven Hearth Council turned to Soren. Bren pushed the grain reserve ledger toward the table. Gatekeeper, if Ella refuses to redeem herself, the guarantee becomes void. You may enter into a hearth oath with her, provided she consents, and the Hemlock Hearth Hall will continue to bear the responsibilities of the relationship. Otherwise, the Confederation must accept a ransom of equal value and allow her to return to her original faction. Ronan immediately said, she has a prior betrothal with me. That is precisely why we must let her choose for herself, Bren replied impatiently. Everyone's gaze fell upon Soren. I hadn't spoken to him alone in many days. He stood up, removed the black iron clasp symbolizing his role as gatekeeper, and placed it on the table. I do not claim the right to keep Ella as my partner. It felt as if something had struck my chest with great force. The muscles around Bren's broken horn tensed. Then do you agree to the ransom? I refuse to answer for her. You have only these two choices. No. Soren looked toward the seven hearth seats. The Federation has a third option, to relinquish its right to use Ella as a hostage for the ceasefire. A sudden stir ran through the assembly. Bren slammed his palm down on the table. Do you know what that means? The winter granaries could be shut down immediately, and salt mine allocations would be suspended. I know. You're risking the 7 halls for one person? I am accountable to the Federation's own asylum law, Soren said quietly, yet his words silenced the argument. We accepted proxy consent without the individual's confirmation. If we had forced her to take the oath on the pretext of grain even after discovering doubts, the 30 nights of asylum would have been nothing more than a lie told to guests. He turned to Ayman. Regardless of how the oath court rules on the Ver family's liability, the Stanahorn Federation no longer claims control over Ella's migration, marriage, or allegiance. You have no authority to unilaterally relinquish the treaty's benefits, Bren said. Therefore, I accept the vote of no confidence. Soren pushed the gatekeeper's iron clasp to the center of the table. He didn't look at me, nor did he say I love you. Just when everyone was wondering whose side I was on, he took away his own answer first. I finally understood that what he had rejected in the corridor wasn't me. What he rejected was an opportunity for me to trade my loyalty for safety. Ronan stood up. This proves you're influenced by personal feelings and are completely unqualified to represent Stone's Corner. First you manipulated her into breaking her betrothal, and now you're using your resignation to force her to repay you. He didn't ask me to repay him. I stood up as well. Kaya placed my wooden box on the evidence table. After Ayman verified the seal, he removed the letters one by one. This is the first letter Ronan wrote to me after the exchange. He asked me to keep an eye on the troop strength, food supplies, and guard rotations at the Hemlock Hearth. That was a ceasefire risk assessment, Ronan said. This is the second one. He demanded that I change my position on the condition that my mother's residence be re-audited. The Marin family's debts needed to be audited anyway. This is a letter from 2 months before the exchange. You wrote that I was the guarantor most readily accepted by both sides. Ronan's expression finally changed. Private correspondence has been taken out of context, this cannot. Which is why I'm submitting all the originals, without omitting a single passage. Ayman instructed the scribe to circulate the documents by date. I took out the copy of Maeve's pledge that she had given me. She had handed it to Kayla that morning. It stated that Ronan would annul his original betrothal and publicly unite with her upon her return to Red Oak Castle. The date was only 2 days apart from Ronan's request that I continue to wait for redemption. I will not testify on Ella's behalf. Maeve spoke from her seat in Ember Valley. I only attest that this letter was written to me by Ronan. He told me that Ella chose to remain at Stone's Corner, and he also told Ella that he would reinstate the betrothal. The rest is for the Court of Oaths to decide. Ronan looked at her. Do you know what you're doing? I will no longer make excuses for you. For the first time, the certainty on his face vanished completely. Ayman unfolded the final verification document. The Stonegate Oath Court has confirmed that the 2 witnesses listed on the power of attorney were not present at Red Oak Castle on the date of signing. The emergency witness list was submitted by Ronan Ver's private scribe, who admitted that, at Ronan's instruction, he reused the witness names from another document dated 3 days prior. Ronan spun abruptly toward the Ember Valley record bench. No one spoke on his behalf. I did not forge Ella's will, he said. She had long ago authorized me to represent the Marin family. The scope of the authorization was limited to negotiations regarding shares in Silverstream Landing, Ayman said. The document contains no provisions regarding war guarantees or the exchange of persons. The power of attorney lacks valid witnesses, and the authorization exceeds its scope. The Oath Court finds that Ella Marin never legally consented to serve as a guarantor for the exchange. No one in the circular courtroom gasped. The representative from Ember Valley lowered his head to speak. Quickly moving his seat away from Ronan, 2 recorders simultaneously took away his heir's statement, marking it pending review. Bren's face darkened as he stared at the iron clasp Soren had set down. The real-world consequences struck faster than any rebuke. Ronan looked at me, and for the first time, genuine panic flashed in his eyes. Ella, I admit there was a flaw in the procedure, but I had no other choice at the time. Maeve would have died, and war would have broken out again at the border. Are you really going to dismiss our 8 years together just because of the names of 2 witnesses? It's not about the names of 2 witnesses. I slipped off my engagement ring. The ring wasn't expensive to begin with. After Ronan secured his inheritance vote, he wanted to trade it for a bigger one, but I refused. What I cherish is the promise he made to me when he was at his lowest. Now that the promise is gone, the weight of the metal left behind means nothing. It was you who knew I would suffer, yet decided for me anyway. It was you who thought Maeve was fragile, so she should be saved. I was strong, so I could be sacrificed. It was you who, after I refused to continue working for you, used my mother, the old estate, and the winter of both clans to force me back into my place. I just know you. What you know is an Ella who would always forgive you. I placed the ring on the evidence table. She no longer exists. Ronan circled the table, as if to grab my hand. The Stanahorn guard flinched, but Soren raised his hand to stop him. He didn't let anyone block this final step for me. I stepped back on my own. Don't touch me. Ronan stopped. You said you wouldn't leave, his voice cracked. When no one believed me, you were the one who stood by me. You can't erase everything just because I made one mistake. I haven't erased anything. I admit I loved you, and I admit those years were real. Then come back with me. We can start over. A real past isn't a reason to keep hurting me. I turned to Ayman. I'm applying for confirmation of my status as a free hearth. The registrar spread out the prepared documents. Myra's voluntary separation papers, my property relinquishment form, and the minimum livelihood guarantee for a homeless hearth were all stamped. Eamon asked, following procedure, "Are you aware that upon confirmation, you will permanently relinquish the Marin ancestral home, your inheritance rights to Ashen Valley, and your eligibility for automatic return?" "I am aware." "Has anyone coerced you into applying through marriage, residence, debt, or personal safety?" "No." "Has the Hemlock Hearth required you to take an oath as a condition of admission?" "No." "Whose partner, family member, or affiliate are you applying to become?" I saw Soren standing behind the recording desk. His hand was far from the guardian's iron clasp, his expression showed neither urgency nor expectation. "No one," I said. "I'm applying to be a free person." Eamon affixed the chief oath-taker's seal. The old exchange agreement was nullified for me, the original betrothal contract was entered into the termination records, and my free hearth registration was established. But Bren did not rise. "The status issue is resolved, but winter isn't," he said. "If the West Coast closes its granaries because the guarantees are invalid, the 3 halls on the East Coast won't last past the first snowfall. Ember Valley needs salt too, but they can hold out longer than we can." Ronan seemed to have seized his last bargaining chip. "The Ver family won't accept a sharing agreement without guarantees." "They will," I said. Kaya placed another scroll of documents on the table. "Over the past 3 years, the Ver family has received 40% of Silverstream Ferry's profits, the Stanahorn Federation 30%, and the remainder has been distributed among neutral merchant caravans. Should either party blockade the ferry, the security deposit will first cover the winter shortfall on the opposite shore, both sides will each send 2 rotating supervisors, and the ledgers will be kept at the Stonegate Oath Court. Salt mines and granaries will be exchanged monthly, rather than in a single lump sum delivery." Bren quickly scanned the figures. "Where does the security deposit come from?" "The Ver family uses their ferry dividends as collateral, and the 7 forges use their salt mine dividends as collateral. Whichever party breaches the agreement will be the first to forfeit the next season's profits." A representative from Ember Valley asked, "What makes you think the Ver family will agree to this?" "Because losing their ferry dividends will prompt Ronan's uncles to call a family vote even faster than losing me would." Several Embervale representatives exchanged glances. "This wasn't a plan I came up with on the day of the hearing. I managed the accounts at Red Oak Keep for 8 years. I know which revenue streams fund the cavalry and which debts secure alliance votes. I also know that Stanahorn is short on grain, but not on salt that can be used as collateral." Eamon reviewed the draft and declared that the proposal complied with the alternative collateral clauses shared by Wintergate, allowing both councils to proceed with a provisional vote on the spot. Ronan was not eligible to vote. His right to represent his inheritance had been temporarily suspended due to a forged consent procedure. The Embervale seat was taken over by another representative. The vote continued until nightfall. Ultimately, the 7 Forges Council accepted the non-personal guarantee by a vote of 5 in favor and 2 against. The Embervale representative also agreed under pressure from the possibility that the Ver family might lose their ferry revenues. The agreement would be implemented on a trial basis for 1 winter, overseen by the Stonegate Oath Court. Ronan stood in the seat without an emblem, as if realizing for the first time that the future of the Ver family could continue without his decision. Before he left the round court, he asked me one last time, "If I had asked you first, would you have agreed?" I thought about it for a long time. "Maybe I would have." A glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. "Then why couldn't you?" "Precisely because I might have said yes, you should have asked." That glimmer faded. Maeve didn't leave with him in the same carriage. She applied to the Court of Oaks for a temporary neutral passage permit, intending to join a merchant caravan on the south bank that had long-standing ties with the Arden family. "Aren't you going back to Red Oak Castle?" I asked. "While I was held at the border, I waited every day for Ronan to rescue me," she said, tightening her cloak. "Later, I thought that by sacrificing you to save me, he was proving I was more important than you." She glanced at the Ver convoy in the distance. "Now I understand that what he needs is someone to always prove his choices were right. Today it's you, tomorrow it will be me." We didn't embrace, nor did we forgive one another. She simply left the original letter Ronan had written to her with the Council of Oaths and boarded the southbound stagecoach alone. That very night, the Council of the 7 Forges initiated a recall review. Soren was temporarily relieved of his duties as gatekeeper, and his position as leader of the Hemlock Forge would require a new vote by the Forge's members. Kaya was elected as interim gatekeeper, responsible for enforcing the new agreement. When I heard the news, I was caring for my mother in the unclaimed hearth. "Are you going to see him?" my mother asked. The medicine spoon in my hand paused for a moment. "Not right now." It wasn't a punishment. I had only just been granted the freedom to leave, and I didn't want to fill it immediately with an emotional attachment. Over the next few months, the new agreement did not go smoothly. The first batch of grain wagons was held up for 2 days at Silverstream Ferry due to discrepancies in the accounts. Kaya personally led supervisors from both sides to reweigh the cargo. North Forge complained about insufficient security deposits, while the uncles from Ember Valley demanded the sale of a portion of the ferry's shares. But no one suggested exchanging a person to resolve the issue anymore. On the day of the revote at the Hemlock Hall, Kaya sent me a note without a wax seal. The note contained only the result: Soren retained her position as chieftain with 70% support, and she would continue to serve as acting gatekeeper. I pressed the paper against the table, not putting it away in the wooden box right away. My mother glanced at it. "Aren't you going to reply?" "He didn't write to me." "Why did Kia send the vote tally, of all things?" I pretended not to understand and lowered my head to continue reconciling the accounts for the neutral merchant caravan. That evening, I still made a trip to the public courier station at Shimen Pass. I rewrote the letter to Soren 3 times. The first draft was too formal, like an official letter from the Court of Oaths. The second draft offered too many explanations, as if my prolonged absence required his understanding and forgiveness. In the end, I left only 2 sentences. "I've heard about the voting results. May you remember this time that the trust of the members must also be continually reaffirmed." After finishing, I added one more sentence: "My door has a new lock." This sentence could be a rejection, or it could be an invitation for him to knock again. I offered no explanation. 10 days later, a narrow wooden box arrived from the Hemlock Hall. Inside was the dagger I'd left at the guest quarters. The blade had been resharpened, and the old key lay beside it. No love letters, no reminders. Just a single line from Soren: "You still decide when to return the key. The dagger is yours." I placed the dagger on a shelf in my new house and kept the key at my waist. It wasn't until then that I allowed myself to admit I was waiting for him to come. Once my mother's arm had healed, we rented a small stone cottage on the south side of the abandoned hearth. There were no white roses behind the house, only a few hardy blue-leaved plants. She filled an entire wall with the books she'd brought from our old home, and I used my first paycheck from the neutral accounts office to buy 2 new chairs. The unclaimed hearth entrusted me with organizing the monthly ledgers for the new agreement, not because I was someone Soren had once protected, but because I could read both the share marks of Ember Valley and the hearthmark records of Stonehorn. When I received my first paycheck, the record keeper had me sign in the free members column. There was no Ver family affiliation number, nor anyone's spouse's surname. The money wasn't much, just enough to cover rent, herbs, and half a winter's worth of firewood. But when I handed the money pouch to my mother, she insisted on taking only her share of the scribe's wages. "Just because we live together doesn't mean anyone has to depend on anyone else," she said. So we nailed a small wooden board to the kitchen wall and kept a record of our shared expenses. That ledger was pitifully thin, yet it was the most reassuring ledger I'd ever seen. Ronan's inheritance claim has been frozen, and the Stonegate Oath Court continues to examine his private records and the private seal used by the assailants. While there is no evidence proving that he personally ordered the Mountain Road attack, there is sufficient evidence to show that someone in the Ver camp attempted to interfere with the investigation. He no longer serves as the truce representative. I heard that Maeve went to the South Shore to join that caravan managing the detainee relief fund. By the time this news reached me, it no longer cut like a knife. They were merely a breeze from the old world that occasionally blew in through the crack in the door. One afternoon after the first snowfall, someone knocked on the door. 3 knocks, perfectly measured. I opened the door and saw Soren standing at the bottom of the steps. He wasn't wearing the gatekeeper's cloak, wasn't carrying the chieftain's longsword, and wasn't even riding a Federation warhorse. In his hands, he held only an ordinary earthenware jug and 2 cups without a kiln mark. "Kaya said you needed someone to repair the roof," he said. My mother coughed from inside, clearly trying to stifle a laugh. "The roof was already repaired yesterday." "Then I'm too late." Soren didn't step inside. After a revote in the Hemlock Hearth, he retained his position as chief, as the members believed that upholding the shelter law did not constitute a betrayal of the hearth. However, the position of gatekeeper remained with Kayla, at least until the first winter under the new agreement had passed. The price he paid for initially accepting the proxy's consent did not disappear just because we later fell in love. "What are you here for?" I asked. "To request an audience." "In what capacity?" "Soren Thorn. Not the Lord of the Hemlock Hearth." "If that title affects your answer, I can leave the voting records at the door as well." I looked down at the clay jug in his hand. "Hearth wine. Hot berry water. No ceremonial potency." "Are you sure?" Iman inspected the jug. I couldn't help but chuckle. His shoulders visibly relaxed, yet he remained waiting at the foot of the steps. "You can come in," I said. As Soren crossed the threshold, he glanced at the new lock on the door. The old key from Hemlock Hall hung from my belt, and my dagger rested on a rack within easy reach. My mother spoke with him at length, asking about the winter provisions at Hemlock Hall, whether Kayla was getting enough sleep, and whether he now had the authority to detain anyone at the border. No, Soren replied, nor should I. Only then did she return to her room to rest. We were alone in the room. Soren poured hot berry water into 2 cups, placed one in front of me, but didn't hand it to me. Are you still waiting for my permission to drink? You refused the first time. That was the public cup of hospitality. This is just a drink I brought. Are you afraid I'll misunderstand? I'm afraid I'll assume again that it's okay not to ask. I took the cup in my hand. The warmth slowly seeped through the ceramic walls into my palm. Soren, out in the hallway, I really thought you didn't want to choose me. I know. Why didn't you tell me you were going to give up your position? Because that would have become a different kind of pressure. You might have agreed to something you didn't really want to, just to keep me from losing my position. You always put things so well. He was silent for a moment. I wanted to say yes that day, too. That statement, at last, wasn't quite so true. I wanted to keep the 7 forges from taking you away, to make sure Ronan would never again have the right to call you his fiancé, and to let everyone know you were by my side. His fingers tightened around the rim of the cup. But you were so scared back then that your whole body was shaking. If I'd agreed, I'd have spent the rest of my life wondering whether you'd said it because you wanted to, or just to save me. So you left the decision up to me. And you suffered alone for a long time because of it. He didn't call his restraint perfect. I gazed out the window. Behind the house, a thin layer of snow covered the blue-leaved grass, and in the distance, the road split north and south. My neutral pass is in the drawer, enough to take me to any hearth that's willing to accept a free member tomorrow. I didn't let him sit here just because I had nowhere else to go. Did you come here today to ask me something? Soren set down his cup. May I court you? No treaty? No counsel? Kai is only good for mocking me. And you're not asking me to join the Hemlock Hearth? You can retain your free hearth membership, live here, or go anywhere. If you're willing to take the hearth oath in the future, we'll each give our consent again. If you're not willing, it won't affect today's answer. I unfastened the old key from my waist and placed it on the table. He looked at the key, his expression shifting slightly. Are you returning it? This is the key to the guest room in the Hemlock Hall. Keeping it won't open any doors here. I held out my hand, palm up. That was the same gesture Ronan had made toward me at Stone Gate. The difference was that Soren didn't take it right away. Is that okay? He asked. It's okay. His hand covered mine, warm, rough, without applying any extra pressure. I was the first to clasp his hand tightly. I accept your proposal, I said, but my hearth, home, and decisions still belong to me. All right. What if one day I say no? Then it's a no. What if I leave? His fingertips tightened slightly, then relaxed, leaving me room to pull my hand away at any moment. I'll be sad, he said, but the door will stay open. I picked up the cup of hot berry water, which held no contractual power, and took a sip. It was so tart I grimaced. Soren looked at me. Kaya made it. You can tell her she's not cut out for this. Tell her yourself. I'd like to live past this winter. I laughed out loud. He didn't take the opportunity to kiss me, he just sat quietly, waiting for me to reach across the table on my own. I pulled his hand closer and leaned down to brush my lips against his. It was very light, and very brief. As I pulled away, his breathing was ragged, yet he still asked first, can we keep going? Snow began to fall outside the window again. I glanced at my own door, my own lock, and the path outside the door, the one I could take to leave at any moment. Yes, I said.